The debate that you're about to see is, in my opinion, one of the most important of our time. This is not a debate between left and right, but a debate between critical thinking and activism. And there is a lot of subtext to this one. Let's introduce the first speaker. Michael Eric Dyson is an academic, a radio host, an ordained minister, and a political activist. And by the way, a postmodernist professor, just for a bit more context. Here we go.
And I ain't seen nobody be a bigger snowflake than white men who complain. Mommy, they won't let us play and have everything we used to have under the old regime where we were right racists and supremacists and dominant and patriarchs and hated gays and lesbians and transsexuals that, yeah, you gotta share. This ain't your world, this everybody's world. And let me end by saying this. You remember that story from David Foster Wallace? Fish are going down, two fish are going, and an older fish comes in the opposite direction. He said, hello boys, how's the water? They swim on, they turn to each other, what the hell is water? Because when you're in it, you don't know it. When you're dominant, you don't know it. Nothing, Kaiser Soze said, is more interesting that the devil did than to make people believe he didn't exist. That's what white supremacy is.
So if you're white and you have an issue with the cultural Marxist narrative that's happening in our society, the only reason for that is because you want to go back to the old days of being white supremacists. You want to be able to gratuitously oppress minority groups. And behind the facade of being someone who just, wants to live your life and doesn't really care about what color people's skins are or who they want to sleep with, behind that veil, there is a racist, homophobic, misogynistic oppressor. And your cunning plan is to hide that from the world. But activists like Michael Eric Dyson, they have got your number. They know what you're up to. And guys, if you've watched my video on the history of woke ideas, then what he is doing right now will make a lot of sense to you. And if you haven't watched it, that's fine. You can watch that video next and it will still make sense. And listen very closely here, guys, because the crowd is kind of split at the start, but by the end of it, the sincere yet genius tactics of Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry completely turn the crowd into their favor and expose Michael Eric Dyson for the pretentious snake oil salesman that he is. Make sure you stick around for that.
Well, I think it's one of the primal sins of identity politics players on the left and the right, just to be clear about that. Personally, since this has got personal at times, I'm no fan of the identitarian right. I think that anybody who plays a game, a conceptual game where group identity comes first and foremost, risks an exacerbation of tribalism. It doesn't matter whether it's on the left or the right. With regards to the idea of group rights, well, there's a fundamental, and this is something we've fallen into terribly in Canada, not least because we had to contend with the threat of Quebec separatism. But the idea of group rights is extraordinarily problematic because the obverse of the coin of individual rights is individual responsibilities. And you can hold an individual responsible, and an individual can be responsible. And so that's partly why individuals have rights. But groups, how do you hold a group responsible? I mean, the whole idea is it's not a good idea to hold a group responsible. First of all, it flies in the face of the idea of the sort of justice systems that we've laid out in the West that are essentially predicated first on the assumption of individual innocence, but also on the possibility of individual guilt, not group guilt. We saw what happened in the 20th century many, many times when the idea of group guilt was enabled to get a foothold, let's say, in the polity and in the justice system. It was absolutely catastrophic. And so, okay, fine, group rights. Well, how are you going to contend with the alternative to that, the opposite of that? Where's the group responsibility? And how are you going to hold your groups responsible? Well, we don't have to talk about that because we're too concerned with rectifying historical injustices, hypothetical and otherwise. And that's certainly not to say that there weren't any shortage of absolutely catastrophic historical injustices. That's not the point. The point is how you view the situation at the most fundamental level. And group rights are an absolute catastrophe, in my opinion.
The reason that Trump and Brexit in Britain and all kinds of nativists all over Europe are succeeding is not the triumph of the right, it's the catastrophic failure of the left. It's our fault. We absolutely... My point is not that I've turned to the right or anything like that, or that I'm nice and fluffy and want everybody to be decent. I'm saying political correctness. Resist. Fight. If you have a point of view, fight it in the proper manner, using democracy as it should be, not channels of education, not language. You know, it's so silly.
But, Steve-
There's a chess rule, you know. In chess, the best move to play in chess is not the best chess move, it's the move your opponent least wants you to play.
But you
At the
said
moment, you're being recruiting sergeants for the right.
But
by
wait a minute.
annoying and upsetting, and instead of fighting, either fighting or persuading. But political correctness is a middle course that simply doesn't work.
Now, for those of you who don't know Stephen Fry, he's an atheist and a lefty, but an absolutely brilliant man. And you may disagree with him about things as I do, but he's not afraid to have a conversation, and he's not afraid to go against the grain when the ideology of the left goes too far, as we can see here tonight. He's extremely introspective about his side of the fence in terms of political correctness, shutting down discourse and debate, and stifling conversation. Side note, if you're into ancient mythology, Stephen Fry's book Mythos about Greek mythology, absolutely amazing. Peterson and Fry are introspective, they're sincere, and they only talk about the idea. They're not trying to attack the individuals on the other side of the stage. They're there to discuss an idea, and they come across as if they actually want to get to the bottom of it.
See, I obviously and ideally, and I think Michelle Goldberg does too.
I love the mansplaining. I'm enjoying it.
You're loving what?
The mansplaining that's going on.
Agree with the emphasis on individuals. What we're saying to you is that we have not been permitted to be individuals. We have not been permitted to exercise our individual autonomy and authority, and the refusal to do so, to recognize me as an individual, means when you roll up on me and I'm a 12-year-old boy in a park and you shoot first, in ways you do to black kids that you don't do to white kids, you are not treating that person as an individual. If we're living in a society where women are subject to aberrant forms of horrid, patriarchal, sexist, and misogynist behavior, you are not acknowledging the centrality of the individuality of women. You are treating them according to a group dynamic. And if we get beyond the ability of people on the right to understand the degree to which they have operated from the basis of benefit from group identity, without having said, I end by saying this. The great American philosopher Beyonce Knowles said that it has been said that racism is so American that if you challenge racism, you look like you're challenging America. We are challenging inequality. We are challenging the refusal to see me as an individual. When we overcome that, have at it, we're all on equal plane.
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
The pot is getting stirred here.
So what we just saw there was Michael Eric Dyson doing the typical postmodernist thing. And here's how he does it. Speak loud and fast, say big words whenever possible, as much as possible, and pull the victim card and make everything a battle of power and oppression. Put all those things together and you have what I like to refer to as a postmodernist word salad. And the regular person who doesn't really take much notice of these things, or who's sitting in the audience at this debate, might think, holy shit, this guy's actually really smart. I would hate to debate him. But Stephen Fry and Jordan Peterson know exactly what he is up to. Because not only are they smarter than him, they know all the words that he's saying. He can't pull the wool over their eyes. And they're going to make him pay for it, but not in the way that you would expect.
So I've got a couple of questions.
So let's your side spoke, so I'm going to go to Jordan, then to you,
Let's
Michelle.
assume for a moment that I've benefited from my white privilege. Okay, so let's assume that. That's
a good
fine.
assumption. That's
yeah,
a good
well, that's
assumption.
what you would say. So let's say, here, let's get precise about this, okay?
Was that very individual of you?
Let's get precise about this, okay?
Let's get precise.
To what degree is my present level of attainment or achievement a consequence of my white privilege? And I don't mean sort of. I mean, do you mean 5%? Do you mean 15%? Do you mean 25%? Do you mean 75%? And what do you propose I do about it? How about a tax? How about a tax that's like specialized for me so that I can account for my damn privilege, so that I can stop hearing about it? Now, let's get precise about one other thing, okay? We'll get precise about one other thing. Now,
Precise.
yeah, precise, yes. And so, if we can agree, and we haven't, that the left can go too far, which it clearly can, then how would my worthy opponents precisely define when the left that they stand for has gone too far? You didn't like equity, equality of outcome. I think that's a great marker. But if you have a better suggestion and won't sidestep the question, so let's figure out how I can dispense with my white privilege, and so that you can tell me when the left has gone too far, since they clearly can. And that's what this debate is about political correctness. It's about the left going too far. And I think it's gone too far in many ways. And I'd like to figure out exactly how and when so the reasonable left could make its ascendance again and we could quit all this nonsense.
One of my favorite moments of this entire video is when Jordan Peterson says that the reasonable left can make its ascendance again and points to Stephen Fry, because Stephen Fry is the reasonable left. And there are many of them out there. But unfortunately, the loudest voices are the ones trying to tear at the fabric of our society. And humble and intelligent voices like Stephen Fry get drowned out.
Jordan's point about how does he, in a sense, get an equal voice in this debate back if it is implied that his participation brings with it this baggage of white privilege that doesn't allow him to see clearly the issues that are before us.
But that is to be complicit in the very problem itself terminologically. You're beginning at a point that's already productive and controversial. You're saying, how can he get his equality back? Who are you talking about? Jordan Peterson, trending #1 on Twitter? Jordan Peterson with an international bestseller? I want him to tweet something out about me in my book. Jordan Peterson, right? This is what I'm saying to you. Why the rage, bruh? You're doing well, but you're a mean, mad white man. And you're going to get us right. And I have never seen so much wine and snowflaking. There's enough wine in here to start a vineyard. And what I'm saying to you empirically and precisely, when you ask the question about white privilege, the fact that you ask it in the way you did, dismissive, pseudoscientific, non-empirical, and without justification, the truth is that white privilege doesn't act according to quantifiable segments. It's about the degree to which we are willing as a society to grapple with the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality upon which it's based. Number two, what's interesting to me, you're talking about not having a collective identity. What do you call a nation? Are you Canadian? Are you Canadian by yourself? Are you an individual, or are you part of a group? When America formed its union, it did so in opposition to another group. So the reality is that those who are part of group identities in politics deny the legitimacy and validity of those groups and the fact that they have been created thusly, and then have resentment against others. All I'm asking for is the opportunity. The quotation you talk about, the difference between equality of outcome and equality of opportunity, that's a staid and retried argument, hackneyed phrase derived from the halcyon days of the debate over affirmative action. Are you looking for outcomes that can be determined equally, or are you looking for opportunity? If you free a person after a whole long time of oppression and say now you are free to survive, if you have no skills, if you have no quantifiable means of existence, what you have done is liberated them into oppression. And all I'm suggesting to you, Lyndon Baines Johnson, one of our great presidents, said, if you start a man in a race 100 years behind, it is awfully difficult to catch up. So I don't think Jordan Peterson is suffering from anything except an exaggerated sense of entitlement and resentment, and his own privilege is invisible to him, and it's manifest with lethal intensity and ferocity right here on stage.
Jordan, I'm going to have to let you respond to that if you will.
Now, before we see this intellectual terrorist get exposed, I just want to remind you all that if you want to join the community, go to rattlesnaketv.locals.com for exclusive, uncensored access to my weekly news show and much, much more. Link in the bio. Back to the clips.
Well, what I derive from that series of rebuttals, let's say, is twofold. The first is that saying that the radical left goes too far when they engage in violence is not a sufficient response by any stretch of the imagination, because there are sets of ideas in radical leftist thinking that led to the catastrophes of the 20th century, and that was at the level of idea, not at the level of violent action. It's a very straightforward thing to say you're against violence. It's like being against poverty. It's like, you know, generically speaking, decent people are against poverty and violence. It doesn't address the issue in the least. And with regards to my privilege or lack thereof, I mean, I'm not making the case that I haven't had advantages in my life and disadvantages in my life like most people. You don't know anything about my background or where I came from, and it doesn't matter to you because fundamentally I'm a mean white man. That's a hell of a thing to say in a debate.
to say.
Very, very brief, because I want to move on to men and women. A good topic next.
The mean mad white comment was not predicated upon my historical excavation of your past. It's based upon the evident vitriol with which you speak and the denial of a sense of equanimity among combatants in an argument. So I'm saying again, you're a mean mad white man, and the viciousness is evident.
Okay. Okay. Let's reset.
What you've just seen there is a minimalistic sincerity triumphing over arrogance, over aggression, and self-aggrandizement. And let me explain to you why Jordan Peterson knows exactly what he's doing here. There's an old saying in boxing and combat sports that is, styles make fights. And what's meant by that is that the styles of the two fighters will determine how good the fight is and also who the winner is. And it's a similar thing in debates. And we see it here in the sense that Michael Eric Dyson is extremely pompous. He's a very smart man with a brilliant vocabulary. He's extremely well read and is undoubtedly a force of nature when it comes to linguistics. He's also extremely charismatic and mixes in a lot of humor as well. So he is a very, very formidable person to debate against. And Peterson is all of those things as well. However, I'm sure you would have noticed that Michael Eric Dyson is coming across as very arrogant. So instead of trying to go toe-to-toe with him, and instead of trying to match him intellectually, match him linguistically, be funnier than him, Peterson is very minimal. And he distills what he really needs to say in one sentence.
You don't know anything about my background or where I came from, and it doesn't matter to you because fundamentally I'm a mean white man. That's a hell of a thing to say in a debate.
This makes him look very humble, and this makes him look very sincere and honest, and he just lets Dyson walk himself to the gallows. And this is just perfectly encapsulated at the end of that clip when Michael Eric Dyson tries to tell Jordan Peterson that his rhetoric is vitriolic after the barrage of racial slurs and personal attacks that he just perpetrated. And you could hear the audience's reaction. They started booing him.
Well, I think I'm going to point out two things again. The first is that my question about when the left goes too far still hasn't been answered. And then the second thing I'm going to point out is that, you know, it's conceivable that I am a mean man. You know, I mean, maybe I'm meaner than some people and not as mean as others. I think that's probably more the case. But I would say the fact that race got dragged into that particular comment is a better exemplar of what the hell I think is wrong with the politically correct left than anything else that could have possibly happened.
Imagine the hurt, the anxiety, the insult that you might genuinely feel, according to what I felt was an appropriate comment of description at the moment of its expression. But imagine now those hurt feelings and
Not hurt.
when okay, you feel great. You feel great about it.
That's really different. I'm not a
Right.
victim. I'm not hurt. I'm
You're
appalled.
not hurt. Okay, you wouldn't be a victim. So what's interesting is that whatever non-traditional feelings of empathy you endure at this particular point, the point is, imagine then the horrors that so many others have had to put up with for so long when they are refused to acknowledge their humanity. Now, I take your point seriously.
So your group
let me finish. Let me finish, though. Let me finish.
To me.
Let me finish, sir.
That figures.
You're not-
Once again, guys, Jordan Peterson just keeps it nice and simple. Michael Eric Dyson is pulling the victim card, pulling the race card, pulling all of the stops to try and backtrack because he knows that he showed his true colors. So Peterson keeps it nice and simple, does the I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed thing, and lets him hang himself. And make no mistake, guys, Michael Eric Dyson is a racist. The fact that he keeps on attributing ill will towards people because of the color of their skin is racist. That is the definition of racist. And I'm sure the irony is not lost on you guys that he is some sort of racism activist, but he is an actual racist. Just imagine if it were Peterson and Stephen Fry who made similar comments but about black people. Their careers would never recover. They would be rightfully exiled and socially ostracized. but he can get away with it. People like Michael Eric Dyson use the goodwill of the everyday person and the tolerance and understanding of the everyday person to push their sinister agenda. And if you haven't noticed by now, I despise that sort of intellectual dishonesty. And the next clip is a little bit off topic, but Michael Eric Dyson tries to banter a little bit with Stephen Fry, and he is just no match for the eloquent and quick-witted Stephen Fry. And this clip makes me laugh every time I watch it.
What's more politically incorrect than a black intellectual going on Bill Maher and defending his ability to continue to have this show despite using the N-word? I, sir, believe in a politically incorrect version. When I go as a Black Baptist preacher to chastise my fellow believers about their homophobia, that goes over like a brick cloud. When I come into arenas like this, I understand that my back is up against the wall. But I think...
Come and sit over here.
I want to sit on your lap. I want to sit on your lap in a while. But what I'm saying to you... But don't get excited. But what I'm saying to you...
Don't flatter yourself.
Oh, that's all right. I see how you've been looking at me. So what's interesting is that when we
Don't flatter yourself. And if you didn't know, Stephen Fry is also gay, so it gives a bit of context to that exchange. Now, for a perfect example of critical thinking versus activism. Peterson and Stephen Fry are both more than willing to accept the flaws on their side. We saw it before with Fry, and we're about to see it again with Peterson. But look at the activists. They can't admit any fault on their side.
Again, what I hear Mr. Peterson talking about as political correctness is something much more broad and much more much more fundamental to social change. And you're talking about, you want me to define, or one of us to talk about when the left goes too far. And if I'm, I certainly don't want to be a woman putting words in your mouth, but if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that you want me to kind of renounce Marxist categories, or to...
It's up to you.
Well,
I just want you to do it. I want you to define when the left goes too far. You can do it any way you want.
Like I said, I think that the left goes too far when it is violent or censorious, when it tries to shut people down or no platform them, or when it acts violently. I'm not sure what you expect
Something
beyond
deeper.
that. Something deeper, how?
Yeah. Well, I'd like you to contend with the set of left-wing ideas that produced all the left-wing pathologies of the 20th century, and to define how you think standard left-wing thinking, which has a valuable place, goes too far, since it obviously does.
Has the right gone too far? Has the right gone too far?
Of course the right
How?
has gone
Tell
too
us
far.
how.
Well, how about Auschwitz?
I mean...
Well,
what
I was
else?
talking about 20th
Is that the
century
right?
politics.
What else? More recently, what has gone wrong with the right?
Look, I don't like identity politics players at all. I don't care whether they're on the left or the right. I've been lecturing about right-wing extremism for 30 years. I'm no fan of the right, despite the fact that the left would like to paint me that way because it's more convenient
How has the
for
right
them.
gone too far recently?
Well, where? It's threatening to go too far in identitarian Europe, that's for sure. It's gone too far in Charlottesville. It went too far in Norway. Like, how long a list do you want? And why am I required to produce that? To show you that I don't like the identitarian
us,
right?
I just thought I'd ask you.
I was actually asking you a question.
If you're talking to someone on the left and they don't understand that the ideas of socialism and communism are inherently bad, and we have receipts for it, then you know you're dealing with an ideologue. If you talk to someone on the right and they can't see that the ideas of ethno-nationalism and fascism and racial supremacy are inherently wrong, and we have receipts, then you're dealing with an ideologue.
I've been fascinated by this conversation. There's been an enormous clash of cultures in the conversation. We've had, classic, if I can call it, huckstering snake oil pulpit talk, which is... It's a mode of discourse, it's a rhetorical style that I find endlessly refreshing and vivifying. I'm sorry that it got a bit heated in places, because I was hoping it wouldn't. I was hoping it would be a shining example of how people of all different kinds of political outlooks can speak with humor and wit and a lightness of touch. As G.K. Chesterton said, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And I think It's very important for us, who are privileged, all four of us, privileged to be here, to be asked to be here, to take ourselves a little bit more lightly, not to be too earnest, too pompous, too serious, and not to be too certain. It's a time, I think, for really engaging, emotionally fulfilling, passionate and positive doubt. That's what I would urge. Thank you.
Is that not the most eloquent way you could possibly ever take a jab at somebody? Huckstering snake oil pulpit talk, but it's endlessly refreshing and vivifying. If someone showed me that sentence on a piece of paper and said, who said that? I would 100% say Stephen Fry. And for those of you who didn't quite pick up on it, a huckstering snake oil salesman would be someone who's like huckstering in the sense that they're like a door-to-door salesman, someone who sells a product and is really annoying and aggressive about it. And then obviously a snake oil salesman is somebody who sells a product that has no actual value or doesn't work. And then a pulpit is the place where priests speak from, the raised, enclosed sort of place. So basically he called him like a preachy, annoying, aggressive person selling something that actually doesn't work. So just such a brilliantly articulate and eloquent way to insult somebody. And then you see Michael Eric Dyson say, wow, to the lady next to him. He's actually offended by it after everything that he said during this debate. Self-awareness, 0. And you might be thinking that maybe I'm a hypocrite because I'm criticizing Michael Eric Dyson for using all of these big grandiose terms and making word salads, but they're not Stephen Fry. But let me tell you the difference between the two. Stephen Fry's is very palatable. He can use these words, but do it in a way that people can generally understand what he's talking about. Michael Eric Dyson, however, deliberately obscures what he's saying. He does it to confuse and or intimidate the people he's talking to or the people that are listening to him. Those are two very different things. If you're arguing something that's actually a very simple concept, or if you're arguing something that you know is wrong, but you can use big words, you can speak fast and make these big word salads that make you seem like this intellectual titan, then you'll convince most people.
I'm used to not exclusively white men who see black intelligence articulated at a certain level, feeling a kind of condescension. If I came up here, Mr. I was saying the other day, but a kind of verbal facility automatically assumed to be a kind of hucksterism and snake oil salesman. I've seen that. I get it. I get hate letters every day from white brothers and sisters who are mad I'm teaching their children. You're just trying to co-opt our children. You're trying to corrupt them. Yes, I'm trying to corrupt them. Yes, I'm trying to corrupt them. Yes, I'm trying to corrupt them.
I don't know about you guys, but I loved just seeing Stephen Fry laughing at the utter ridiculousness and stupidity of Michael Eric Dyson playing the race card and the victim card because they're just so intimidated by the intelligence of this black man. But here's the real takeaway from what he just said. Stephen Fry had absolutely no racial intention with that whatsoever. He was just simply calling him out for his style of rhetoric, which is extremely dishonest. And what does Michael Dyson do? Plays the race card, plays the victim card. This is the perfect example of critical race theory, of cultural Marxism, postmodernism, all of these ideas encapsulated in one moment. Because in his eyes, everything is race. Everything is power and oppression. And there is no interaction that they could possibly have, a black man and a white man, where race could not be at the center of the conversation. This is a sickness. Now for JP to take it home.
It's part and parcel of this, what would you call it, this ideological catastrophe that's political correctness. I'm not here to argue against progress. I'm not here to argue against equality of opportunity. Anyone with any sense understands that even if you're selfish, you're best served by allowing yourself access to the multiplicitous talents of everyone and to discriminate against them for arbitrary reasons unrelated to their competences. It's abhorrent. That has nothing to do with the issue at hand. It isn't that good things haven't happened in the past and shouldn't continue to happen. That's not the point. The point is the point my compatriot Fry made, which is, well, we can agree on the catastrophe and we can agree on the historic inequity, but there's no way I'm going to agree that political correctness is the way to address any of that, and there's plenty of evidence to the contrary, some of which I would say was displayed quite clearly tonight.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you would like access to uncensored, exclusive content and to join the Rattlesnake TV community and support the channel so that I can bring the best content possible to you as often as possible, then please consider hitting the link in the bio, rattlesnaketv.locals.com, and support the channel. And if you want to watch another clip, click right here. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, if you get value from these videos, then click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV.